Today we will begin discussing the path of suffering and happiness. Whether I have the Tibetan lineage for this teaching, I'm not sure. So after I receive the transmission again, I can recite the lineage to all. For now, we will use Chinese to guide everyone. This teaching of the path of suffering and happiness, it is important to note that this can be divided into three distinct aspects, as follows. The meaning of the initial goodness, the discussion of the middle goodness, and the final goodness divided into three parts. Initial goodness means three aspects. One is a discussion of the title, then the verse of homage, and finally the vow. These are the three aspects. First, let's talk about the title, the four characters, the path of suffering and happiness. These four characters actually already express the truly profound essence and deep lasting significance of this entire spiritual teaching. What do they mean by that? Everyone should know, in our world, as we know it, while practicing spiritually, suffering and happiness actually accompany every person's entire life. It's impossible person to have never experienced suffering. Is there anyone like that? No, there isn't. Is there anyone who has been extremely happy always, who has never felt suffering or has never experienced happiness? Is there anyone like that? There isn't either. Suffering and happiness are profoundly and intricately intertwined and come to arise together in life. Some people might find a bit more happiness, for others a bit more suffering. This kind of suffering and happiness for people in the world, everyone feels that suffering is something to be avoided, something to stay away from. As for happiness, it is the goal that people pursue. Most people in the world are like this. And because of this, everyone may be especially enthusiastic about pursuing happiness and well-being, and particularly worried or afraid of encountering suffering. So seeking happiness and avoiding suffering is natural to all. This is something that in your own life experience, you can also feel for yourself. But if we're talking about a practitioner, when he encounters suffering in life at any point, he won't be so afraid either at all. He can also transform it into a meaningful part of his path through his dedicated practice. If he encounters some happiness, he also relies on practice and can transform it into a part of his path as well. Some people might think this way. It is possible to transform suffering into the path. Happiness probably doesn't need to be transformed into spiritual practice. Isn't happiness something we all long for but can't easily get? Shouldn't it be something that, after all, makes us very happy? Why include happiness on the path? Actually, both suffering and happiness need to be transformed into the path. Why do I say this? If it's an ordinary person, when he feels pain, even just a little, he becomes especially sad and deeply, entirely, utterly, and completely loses his spirit. He simply feels that life has no meaning. He can't accept it at all, and is extremely distressed and upset. As a result, all kinds of feelings arise in his heart: anxiety, sadness, extreme vulnerability, and so on. For example, a lot of different negative emotions will arise and come to the surface. After that, life will no longer be normal, as you know it. If he encounters happiness, but will he actually be able to accept it, truly accept it? For ordinary people, even when they are happy, they can't accept it. Because they're happy, they might become arrogant and look down on others. All kinds of negative mindsets can also arise. Some people, if they have good fortune, maybe, just maybe, they can handle happiness. But if they lack good fortune, it's also very hard for them to bear it. There is a well-known saying, as the old proverb goes, great virtue can carry all things. If someone has profound virtue or good fortune, What, after all, can he really bear? He can bear all his immense wealth, all his money, he can definitely handle it. But if he indeed lacks this merit and virtue, even if he has wealth, he truly cannot bear it at all. We can see many people think, I don't have money. If I had money, I'd be happy. I would be joyful and successful, but not always true. If someone doesn't have good fortune, even if he has a lot of money, in the end, he'll become more and more miserable, more and more troubled. In the end, everything could truly be ruined in an instant. That's certainly a real and genuine possibility. So, for most people in the world, on the surface, it seems like happiness is easy to accept, while suffering is hard to accept. But if we analyze it from the perspective of spiritual practice, not only suffering needs to be transformed into a part of the path, but happiness also needs to become part of the path. If you don't transform them into the path, then the happiness and suffering you experience, for example, will not be beneficial to your life. Through spiritual practice, by carefully evaluating your current conditions and making thoughtful adjustments, you can gradually transform them into, therefore, for many practitioners, it's indeed the case that when they experience happiness and joy, they won't look down on others or judge them negatively because of it, not for any reason at all, nor will they develop all kinds of pride and arrogance in their hearts. Relying on this with all kinds of afflictions, he would not act so. When he is really happy, he quickly shares that happiness with other sentient beings. His happiness becomes a favorable condition for spiritual practice, precisely because he is happy. He does not ever lose his virtue because of it in any way. Some of us may also discuss this later on, that generally it is easier for people to cope with suffering, especially in most situations or circumstances in their lives, but it is much harder to deal with happiness. For example, some people in very special circumstances in the past, they would not regress, backslide, or fall back in their spiritual practice, maintaining their progress. But later, due to fame, because of wealth, because of status, for these reasons, their spiritual practice declined. We can see this in other practitioners. When they first arrived, they had nothing to eat, nothing to wear. Yet at that time, they were very strong-willed, diligently practicing without encountering any adverse condition. But later, because many people respected and made offerings to them over time, they gained more material benefits, fame and status. At this point, perhaps their merit could not match it. Insufficient merit, various reasons. In the end, their own spiritual practice and virtue, much of it gradually faded away over time. Situations like this we can also observe in our daily lives. Happiness needs to be transformed into the path. But does suffering become path? For practitioners, suffering very much needs to be transformed into the path. Because in this cycle of samsara, in reality, there is indeed more suffering than happiness. In daily life, whether you consciously notice it or not, or don't notice it, there are always many various different kinds of suffering entangling us. The suffering of change, and the suffering of conditioning, these three major types of suffering are always clinging to us. At such times, if through your own practice, it cannot be converted for practical use, then your spiritual practice may never succeed. No one can go through their whole life peacefully and smoothly. Where no adverse conditions or suffering occur, that does not exist. When we look at those truly remarkable predecessors, those great and noble masters and eminent monks, we also find in their biographies that the suffering they endured and experienced was far greater than that of ordinary people. In such circumstances, if they didn't have a method of spiritual practice used daily, it would indeed have been extremely difficult for them to succeed in their practice. Turning suffering, happiness into path, what does this require? Normally, we need to engage in spiritual practice. If we do not practice regularly experiences path. In theory, it is not possible. Does status or wealth make it possible? No, it does not. This includes, in particular, some of us, because life is very painful, think, I'll just become a monk after I ordain, maybe I won't suffer anymore. But that's not the case. You become a monk, shave off your hair, throw your earrings delicately at least 100 meters away, if you can, throw your rings away. All those material possessions you use to crave, including your lover or family members, you have left all of them behind. But if you do not practice, it's just that you no longer have hair. You're bald, but you're still suffering, crying every day. If you apply the true methods of mind training from Mahayana Buddhism and add them to your mind stream, then haven't shaved or become a monk, or even if there are no external changes at all, but in my heart, no matter what happens, can transform everything into the path. So sometimes we can put it this way, the especially supreme aspect of our Mahayana Buddhism, if you do not practice well consistently, no matter what reputation do you have, whether you are a Khenpo or a Khenmo, whether you are a Geshe or a Geshima, Geshima, right? Is that correct? It's not actually referred to as Geshim. In fact, the correct name should be Geshima. Whether Geshe or Geshima, or whether you are a Dharma master or any kind of monastic or lay practitioner, whether you have taken refuge or received bodhisattva vows, or have received all sorts of empowerments, or have many lamas' heads hanging around your neck. I mean, images of their heads, not actual heads, right? No matter what kinds of blessed objects you have, holding a Vajra bell in your left hand and a prayer wheel in your right, equipped with all kinds of ritual implements. But if your mind is never connected with the Dharma, all these external things, even if you go to the charnel ground and wear all of the traditional charnel ground ornaments adorned as is customary, even if you are dressing up like Yamantaka, it still will not help at all in any way. Indeed, genuine practice is very important. If you are truly, in fact, able to practice, it is hard to accept in the world. What are the things that are very hard to accept in the world? It's when you encounter suffering, you can't face its situations like that. But if you have practiced for a long time, for you, facing them is effortless and you can handle them with ease. This transforms suffering and happiness into path. So I think this teaching is especially important and needed for each and every person in their daily lives. Therefore, we also hope that this transforming suffering and happiness into the path, in fact, its instructions, can effectively and reliably resolve many of the ongoing and complex, challenging conflicts or entanglements within our mental continuum. All of these can be resolved. It can subdue our negative emotions. This is extremely important, especially for practitioners in the field. Therefore, next, how to transform suffering and happiness into the path will be explained in two aspects. So this time, there's no requirement for how many sessions this needs to take at all. So now I'm just going with the flow. I'll cover as much as I can. This way, there's probably no pressure either, because this world is inherently quite an uncertain world. Samsara is like this as well. So sometimes when all sorts of external changes occur, after all kinds of changes have happened, so many truly hidden things deeply within us, originally about to achieve enlightenment, and those things we still can't comprehend, various changes depending on the outer edge, allow some of those deeper inner mysteries to, over time, naturally become clear. This is also a very fortunate circumstance. So for us as practitioners, our way of thinking is in many ways different from that of ordinary people. How do ordinary people think? As I mentioned, when I feel happy, wow, today is joyful, so beautiful, so wonderful, immersed, never wanting to leave. When you wake up in the morning, if you've slept soundly and deeply, wow, it smells so good. If there's an old-fashioned alarm clock next to you, desperately trying to turn off that sound and sleep a little longer, how comfortable that is. You're just completely lost in an overwhelming sea of pleasure. But as a practitioner, joy can become part of the path. More importantly, in daily life, when you encounter hardship, if your parents die or others slander or scold you, or in your life, various kinds of pain occur frequently, waves come one by one. As soon as one arises, another follows at times like this. If you maintain a strong mindset, then you are truly a practitioner. That's about all for today's topic. Thank you for listening, and I hope you found it useful. I may not have spoken much today, and you might have noticed that I was a bit quieter than usual. It's not... Next, I'll now talk about the application of suffering and happiness. The author is Venerable Dodrupchen Tenpai Nyima, who is known as Dodrupchen Tenpai Nyima. Among the 8 great heart sons of the first Dudjom Rinpoche, he really should have been the eldest son. For example, Jigme Ozel, who is known as the husband of Visakha Dakini, a respected figure in the community, and several others with 8 great heart sons. Among them was the great Dodrupchen Tenpai Nyima. He produced many especially excellent works, including commentaries on the Guhyagarbha Tantra. Others have translated them before. I also wanted to teach them at the time, but didn't manage to do so. He also wrote a special treatise on the general principles of Tenma teachings. Previously, in schools in the West, there were brief introductions to some of Dampa Nyma's explanations on Tenma teachings. He is believed to have passed away in 1926. It seems apparently he lived to be 62 years old, having been born in the year 1865, in fact. At that time, it was during the life of Mipham Rinpoche. In the biography of Mipham Rinpoche, it has also appeared many times. He was one of Mipham Rinpoche's most capable disciples, a truly remarkable disciple. His Holiness the Dharma King also often spoke about this before. Once, Patrul Rinpoche also said, now, teachings of Nyingma tradition, there is still hope. Why is there hope? Because Dodrupchen Tenpa Nyima taught the Bodhicharyavatara when he was 8 years old, which shows that the Dharma still has hope. Master Pema Dendap from Jinlong reached Rainbow Body, which demonstrates realization of the Dharma is flourishing. Therefore, many great masters have sincerely praised this author, and there should be much truly genuine admiration for him. His related biographies, notably in several sources, also mention his many varied worldly and transcendental qualities. I have read his spiritual songs, but his spiritual songs with Mipham Rinpoche, the Venerable Vajrasattva, the style of poetry is relatively difficult to understand. The way of bitterness and happiness is easier to understand. It's not particularly difficult to understand some other spiritual dohas. His literary style and approach are generally not especially easy to understand. But regardless, as a matter of fact, this author is extremely renowned in Tibet. Even today, great masters, both within Tibet and also outside of Tibet, are especially fond of studying the ancient teachings and wisdom related to Dampa Nyima, including his exoteric and esoteric teachings, his instructions, his spiritual songs, as well as some of his commentaries and annotations. Tibetan publications of his works, I think there are 6 or 7 volumes, or perhaps even more. The author is, without a doubt, truly an absolutely extraordinary and remarkable master. This is the author. As for the translator, well, that is me. When did I translate this? Feb 21 translation, that day when the pandemic was at its worst. Then I finally completed the translation on March 5th. At that time, I kept, when everyone seemed to be anxious, turning suffering and happiness into path, staying shut in my room every day. And it was actually a very meaningful experience. It felt really, really wonderful. On the very last day, I finished the translation, which should have been March 5th. The number of deaths in China had already surpassed 3,000. Everyone was still extremely tense at that time, and it was during that period that I did the translation. Later, I also did a simple proofreading. There might still be some content inside that could be improved by proofreading while explaining again. This is about transforming suffering and happiness into the path. Next, let's now talk about the second part, the homage verse, in detail. Homage to the noble Avalokiteshvara. Unlike the Tibetan version, but taking into account what comes later as well, paying homage while contemplating the merits described herein, and combining it with this reasoning. Originally, this sentence is the fifth one. Why is that? Because Avalokiteshvara is the bodhisattva who has perfected exchanging self and others. He possesses compassion toward all and is a bodhisattva with a supreme realization. Therefore, to turn suffering and happiness into the path, exchange self and others. The spirit of Avalokiteshvara is extremely important. That is why the author first praises Avalokiteshvara and extols the virtues of Avalokiteshvara. This is also, in fact, the primary reason for making prostrations. Such reasoning can be applied here too. Next, why do we pay homage to Avalokiteshvara? Avalokiteshvara, thus, he is always truly joyful at the happiness of others. Whenever he sees sentient beings happy, Avalokiteshvara also feels joy. Whenever he sees sentient beings who are suffering or in pain, he outwardly and very clearly manifests in his demeanor the most profound, deepest sorrow, or rather, he truly manifests the greatest grief. Such an embodiment of the virtue of great compassion is in fact Avalokiteshvara. As for Avalokiteshvara, what is his true nature? He remains steadfast, having completely eliminated all attachment to his own suffering and happiness. He is different from us ordinary beings. Ordinary people, we haven't cut off attachment to suffering or happiness. Because of this, when we suffer, we feel pained, and when we are happy, we feel truly very joyful. When sentient beings suffer, we don't really feel anything. And when sentient beings are happy, perhaps we don't feel much either. As we discussed in the commentary on the Vimalakirti Sutra, it also says there that when ordinary people see others happy, they develop a sense of aversion, and when they see others suffering, they actually feel quite pleased, truly pleased, even satisfied. But for a bodhisattva, it is exactly the opposite. How is it opposite? When they see sentient beings happy, they truly feel joy deep within their heart. When they see sentient beings suffering, they feel unhappy. Characteristic of a bodhisattva. We people, if we ourselves are happy, we definitely want to have it. If we are suffering, we don't want it. But when it comes to sentient beings, it might even be just the opposite. When we see other sentient beings suffering, we might even feel especially happy. This includes when the pandemic happened this year, whether abroad or among other groups. When a large number of people died, and they were in great pain at that time, there are some people who gloat over others' misfortune. I think those people deserve this should be so. Actually, this is, for the most part, the mentality of most ordinary people. If Mahayana Buddhists, not to mention sentient beings, even towards their most hated enemy, they still really wouldn't want that person to suffer, not in any way. They would rather that person be happy. Even if you can't benefit them, you would still truly wish for their continued happiness and well-being. So here, well, why does the author first visualize Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva in front of them? To pay homage. Why? Is that it is because he has already attained the state of equality between self and others, or even valuing others above oneself. Because of this kind of realization, for this reason, he is worthy of our praise and worthy of our homage. If Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva were just like us, when others are in pain, he is extremely happy and feeling gloomy when he himself is suffering. Nothing remarkable. Avalokiteshvara. If he were the same as us, at the same level as us, but in reality that's not true. For this reason, we should indeed pay homage to him. If I am to pay homage, it should be because he possesses virtues. If he had no virtues at all, and I wanted to pay homage only out of fear. When some leaders criticize their subordinates, the subordinates fear and respect them. Actually, deep down in their heart, they don't accept it at all. Not so. Avalokiteshvara's merit truly surpass every aspect of us ordinary beings. For this reason, it is completely and entirely reasonable, without reservation, for us as individuals and as a community to pay homage to him. It is because he possesses such virtues and moral character that we should pay homage in accordance with the merits described here. We should reflect on Avalokiteshvara. Truly, in this world, is an extraordinary and great bodhisattva. I also wish that I could attain exactly the same in my life ability to benefit sentient beings as Avalokiteshvara, to bear the suffering of sentient beings and to share happiness with sentient beings. I sincerely hope that with all my heart that one day I will attain the same merits and realization as Avalokiteshvara. In this way, on one hand, we recall his virtues, and on the other hand, we also pay homage to him. When we recite words homage, if in our hearts we think, indeed Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva is truly remarkable, I want to revere him. If we think this way in our minds, this is mental prostration. As for the body, you can place an image of Avalokiteshvara in front of you and prostrate, or you can visualize him in your mind towards Avalokiteshvara. If you physically bow down with your body, it is also a form of prostration. Therefore, when we practice, we follow in the footsteps of our predecessors. Why did they prostrate? As Buddhists, we should also prostrate in this way, because we have not attained the merits of body, speech, and mind like his, through respect for him and prayers to him, through this special kind of deep, sincere, and profound reverence and genuine respect. For these reasons, we will gradually, step by step, attain these worldly and transcendental merits. We should indeed think in this way. So what are we talking about here? Just now, it was actually about prostration. The first is the title, the second is prostration, and the third can, in essence, be called making a vow. Usually, when we compose treatises, what follows is a vow. He will briefly explain to all practitioners an essential method of practice, because next he's going to make a vow to explain to us. Explain what exactly? As a practitioner, this is absolutely essential, an indispensable skillful means for practice. So what is this skillful means? It is an unparalleled method in the world, a key to turning suffering and happiness into the path. If we were to measure it in terms of money, how much is it worth? There's no way to say it's priceless. Its value should be extremely, extremely high. This instruction looks like 2 pages, and you may not know how many copies have been printed, but in reality it is priceless. As for its price, even our pricing department couldn't set a value for it. It is truly an invaluable treasure. Without equal, this instruction is treasure. Because this skillful method of practice is truly exceptionally precious. So this Dharma, this key instruction, divides into transforming suffering into the path and transforming happiness into the path. This could be considered in some sense a kind of vow, because all of the content that is discussed in detail below, as we have already mentioned previously, and its actual value specifically, are truly indispensable for practitioners. All of us here, I believe many people claim to be practitioners. For myself, as a practitioner, I often say over and over that I am a practitioner. But as practitioners, when we face suffering, can you transform it into the path? When we truly encounter happiness, can we transform it into the path? If you are someone who practices well, or if you have a solid grasp of the theory, when you encounter suffering or happiness, transform them into path. If your practice is particularly poor, even though you may have studied and contemplated for years in some place, in reality, when you face suffering and happiness, you gain no benefit at all and are unable to turn, then perhaps your practice cannot be considered successful. In Mipham Rinpoche's work, The Words of Advice for the King, a line that I really like whether in pleasure or in suffering. The wise reflect deeply and find benefit. Even if you have suffering and joy, the mindless fool gains nothing. This line is truly very important. Whether truly enjoying moments of happiness or deeply experiencing suffering in our lives, if one is wise, they will deeply contemplate the meaning within. Because of this, indeed, for such a person, even when they experience suffering, it is, without question, still a truly great and important step forward. For example, whether they fall ill, lose a family member, or encounter any other situation, it becomes a great aid to their spiritual practice. As for happiness, be it good health, wealth, or fame, they will not lose themselves in any way because of it, and this too is progress. But for a fool, whether in his own life, how many times you've seen the pain or how often happiness occurs, it brings them no benefit at all. This is a sentence everyone should recite by heart. All of us here today, are we wise or are we foolish? You can judge for yourself. In your own life, when you encounter suffering, does it help you? Does it help your spiritual practice? When you encounter or gain some happiness, does it help your spiritual practice? Does it bring you any benefit or promote your progress? In this regard, we can see that precisely because of this, why do we talk about, for those who practice well, for the wise, this is extremely, extremely important. For those who do not practice well, or the foolish in your life, no matter what happens, apart from losing your morality and virtue and regressing in your practice, it serves no other purpose. This is something that in our own process of practice, we can truly, deeply feel ourselves, especially in those moments. The reason why we talk about transforming suffering and happiness into the path can be briefly explained to everyone here today in a really clear and simple way. Next, in terms of the outline, there are methods for transforming suffering into the path. First, discuss methods for transforming suffering to the path. How should this be divided? There are the conventional methods, as usual, and the ultimate methods, 2 types in total. For suffering, we'll discuss the conventional methods, and for the ultimate methods, we will just briefly mention them in a sentence or two. Madhyamaka, free from 4 extremes, 8 elaborations. Label of suffering does not exist, let alone the actual experience of suffering. This is, after all, summed up in just 1 sentence. I find this statement interesting. In ultimate sense, even the name suffering does not exist, let alone what suffering is. So the ultimate approach is explained very simply because mainly for most ordinary people, those who have not studied Madhyamaka, just like us now, those who have just started learning Buddhism, for people like this, it is very much needed. So originally, this teaching, I really wanted to share it with the public before. Good to chat with people online, but impermanence is in reality just like this. So when such a wonderful teaching is actually given, number of people is smallest, few are present. And even these few people are all masked, so you can't even see their faces, not even a little bit. People wearing masks. In over 30 years of teaching the Dharma, first time I've seen so few people, all within a group of masked individuals, teaching this transforming suffering and happiness into the path. For me, this is quite, it should be that this kind of suffering is transformed into the path. Next, we will discuss how to transform the secular world into the spiritual world, transforming worldly suffering into the path. What does it mean to transform worldly suffering into the path? Perhaps just this 1 sentence is enough for us. When we experience harm or distress from sentient beings or non-sentient things, if in our hearts we habitually tend to hold on to the thought that everything, how painful it is, then even just a very tiny, however small or seemingly insignificant external circumstance or condition can cause us tremendous psychological pain and significant distress. What is the reason for this? Because any thought, whether of suffering or happiness, that we repeatedly habituate to will only grow stronger. This is simply a natural law. I don't know if I can finish explaining this sentence today. This sentence is very interesting. I hope you all will memorize these few lines. If you memorize them, you will definitely become an extraordinary practitioner in the future. If you can't memorize this sentence, then when you encounter suffering in the future, you'll cry and wail. And apart from crying, there will be nothing else you can do. Not only should you memorize these words, but you should also repeatedly familiarize yourself with their meaning. This is necessary in daily life. Next, I'll just briefly talk about it. When we experience harm from sentient beings or harm from non-sentient things, as you all know, in fact, for the most part, most people are unhappy because of love. For example, when a trusted close friend deceives you, perhaps unexpectedly, or your enemy intentionally and deliberately harms you in a purposeful manner, or others, for example, acquaintances, may sometimes even insult or slander you, or create all kinds of obstacles for you, or it might not be people, even animals are included. When it comes to animals, sometimes some practitioners living on the mountain now, rats are in your house at night, making thump, thump, thump noises. You'll also feel quite distressed and very upset emotionally. Or there could be other things like some small insects or perhaps, some other tiny creatures. This even includes some people who might not practice well. For example, before I even wake up in the morning, the sparrows in the courtyard, before dawn has even truly broken, they start chirping noisily and just keep going loudly. If my practice is poor, I might really dislike them, thinking, why won't these beings just let me sleep well? Or at night, there might be dogs barking around you, or any other sentient beings, or indeed other conscious beings. Sentient beings include all living things. In our daily lives, we often encounter both humans and non-humans. Some you might not even be able to see with your eye, but you might feel, are ghosts or spirits playing tricks on me? You sometimes feel like ghosts or spirits are harming you. These are considered harm caused by sentient beings, harm by non-sentient things. On a larger scale, it could be earthquakes or violent winds, or disasters like fire and flood, earth, water, fire and wind. On a smaller scale, it might be, for example, your staircase not being built very well, or if your yard fence suddenly collapses, leaving your property exposed and requiring you to quickly address the issue, or your business is struggling, or you encounter minor disturbances from earth, water, fire, or wind, or other external inanimate objects. All these lifeless things can sometimes be really quite annoying to you as well. Maybe your headphones just never work properly, or your phone won't turn on. These are also kind of psychological harm to you, right? All sorts of things like this, be it living or non-living, or sentient and non-sentient beings, when these things cause you harm, if we habitually think in our minds, this is so painful. Some people used to thinking this way. These people are just so annoying, so very troublesome. It's so painful, so sad, so hopeless. In their whole mindset, there are often negative words. I'm unhappy, I'm so sad, I'm so terrible, I'm just so unlucky. There are hardly any positive words at all. Because there are truly so many really negative emotions within the depths of their heart. If you have negative emotions, since the mind is ultimately in control, all kinds of painful words will from time to time come out of their mouth, because your heart is suffering like this, truly deeply suffering. The only habitual thoughts are, almost always in our experience, painful ones, thinking, today is really so cold, today is so hot. This Dharma seat is so very high indeed, and this one is so very truly low. This building is too tall, this building is too something. This person apparently seems to be such, and so on. So if that's the case in your daily life, this is just an ordinary state of mind, and we may not notice it ourselves. Indeed, nowadays, many people can't recognize it. We think that our way of thinking is completely normal, but in reality, we have developed a kind of psychological illness. Nowadays, many Western psychologists after long periods of careful observation, some psychologists have already identified this kind of psychological illness, in fact, and have classified it into all sorts of different disorders with various syndromes and symptoms, all kinds of different manifestations. But actually, in Buddhism, more than 500 years ago, in ancient times, all these psychological illnesses were explained very clearly. Some of them were categorized under views and perspectives, such as wrong views, inverted views, and so on, giving them these kinds of names. In fact, some psychologists today, some learn these issues by self-watching, while others rely on principles found in religious or ancient cultural texts, and then they give it a different name. And add to their own field of research. There are cases like this. But either way, actually, if we constantly think, I'm miserable and sad, what if this continues? Even the tiniest, most insignificant, the smallest external condition, even just a little bit, for you really, truly, absolutely can bring about tremendous psychological suffering. This point is very important. In Buddhism specifically, we teach that suffering comes from one's own mind. But for most people in the world, all suffering is believed to come from external circumstances. This will also be discussed later in this treatise. If you feel that all suffering and all happiness depend on external things, such a person will never be truly happy. You should understand that you need to adjust your own mind. If your mind is well adjusted, then this kind of happiness can increase. But if your mind is not well adjusted and you keep chasing external material thing or after another person externally, then you will never, no matter what you do, be able to attain true happiness in your life, ever. On the contrary, in fact, you will only increase all kinds, types, and forms of suffering, distress, pain, and hardship. You see, it says even the tiniest external object, if you keep thinking it's so painful, even just the slightest bit of suffering will gradually grow into truly immense suffering. Why is this the case? Because suffering and happiness are actually forms of attachment. These thoughts of suffering and happiness, if you simply keep reinforcing them, they will naturally, over time, grow stronger. If you feel that you are very happy, there just shouldn't be everything is fine. If it rains today, that's very joyful. If it doesn't rain today, that's joyful. Seeing you today makes me happy. Not seeing you today also makes me happy. I ate well today and was very happy. If I don't eat well today, that's also joyful. I can lose weight. If I eat well today, wow, that's really my good fortune, and so on. If I can go to the Dharma hall today, for me personally, that's truly joyful. I meet many Dharma friends. If I can go to the Dharma hall today, that's all right too. I can contemplate impermanence. Listen to sounds, anything is okay. Just like there's a line in the Mahaparinirvana Sutra, if one is constantly troubled by sorrow, the sorrow will only grow. Just as someone who loves to sleep, the more they sleep, the more they want to sleep. This means if we constantly habituate ourselves to thinking, I am in so much pain, then this sorrowful mindset will naturally increase. Like our humans, sometimes people really like to sleep and they genuinely enjoy sleeping. The more you sleep in general, the more you want to sleep. Sleep is also a habit. You really used to not like sleeping, but you get into the habit of sleeping for a while, it really happens. Some time ago, after I came back, I actually didn't have any classes. I also actually hadn't started translating yet. There was really no need to have meetings so early every morning either. So I just slept as much as I could. I couldn't fall asleep, but later on I seemed to sleep for a very long time. It turns out my sleep patterns can be completely changed. So our suffering is the same way. This is quite painful. That is also painful. If it goes on like this, as the days go by little, the experience of suffering will inevitably and naturally continue to grow. This is something we really, truly need to think about. As I mentioned earlier, if we constantly dwell on suffering, then even the tiniest pain, the conditions and circumstances of the outside world, I know it brought a lot of pain and real suffering to you. I think that nowadays, many people out there these days really, really do have these kinds of psychological issues. Speaking of the West, they have psychological counselors or therapists. Generally, as soon as they feel that their mental state has the slightest problem, they don't feel embarrassed at all and will immediately seek help. Psychological counselors there have a very heavy workload, as you might expect. There are so many cases. But in our country and in Tibetan regions, it seems to be quite rare. I don't think I dare to ask in China. I have mental issues. Having a mental issue means something's wrong with your mind. So everyone just feels a bit embarrassed about it. But in reality, we are not saying that there is a kind of obsessive compulsive disorder. What is obsessive compulsive disorder? The person themselves feels that their state is completely reasonable, but in fact, it really isn't reasonable at all. For example, some people at times may experience particularly strong compulsive emotional responses, and this compulsion can manifest in their behavior, or it can be a compulsion in thinking. So what does that look like? For instance, with a window, they always really feel like the window is open, so they slowly get up to close it. Even in the middle of the night, they're closing the window. Then they return to sleep. But no, they feel like the window is open. My door is still open. No, he's definitely good. Or they absolutely have to wash their hands. There are a lot of bacteria on my hands. They are very dirty. They have to thoroughly wash their hands. And even after washing their hands once, they have to carefully wash again. He kept rubbing his hands until the skin was completely worn out. He still wants to wash. And when they simply see certain things, they feel it's especially dirty and want to throw up. Or when arranging even a tiny object, perhaps just so in place, for example, if shoes are placed here, they feel it's not right. It has to be perfectly neat. It has to be a certain way. Some of us Buddhists do indeed have obsessive compulsive disorder too. Nothing works at all. Everything is always required to follow their habits. For example, you might feel there are lots of hairs on your clothes, or think there are tiny particles, dust, or grains of sand and so on. Not okay. So some people spend the whole night repeatedly washing their clothes, taking them to be dry cleaned, and so on. What is this actually? This is a kind of, you could say, it's what is being discussed here. There is a tiny, almost insignificant external condition involved. Is there any external cause? There is a little bit. But in reality, it's an issue with your mind. This is also, in its own way, a kind of problematic situation. Nowadays, psychologists see it this way. But from the perspective of Buddhist practice, it is not external illness. It should be the mind is not adjusted, karma from past lives, as well as the environment and education in this life. Or, to use the language of modern psychologists, perfectionists like this often suffer greatly. They feel everything perfect. I must do it my way. But in fact, insisting on your way is just from your own thoughts. However, these discriminating thoughts can only be appeased, only then can their issues be resolved. However much others try to reason with them, it won't get through. This is a very, very important matter. There's another illness, what's it called? Nowadays, in modern times, it's called paranoia, as it is commonly referred to. They constantly believe that others are in fact always out to get them. For example, when I give you a lecture today, you might feel in your heart, Khenpo is talking about me. He already has an opinion about me. Then, if I glance like this, you think his expression is off. He must have glared at me. That means he absolutely, definitely, really, truly wants to harm me. Or maybe you didn't actually see anything, but you just feel like some non-human being is harming you. Or you think a certain Dharma friend is harming you each day. This is what is simply referred to as paranoia. But there is nothing like that. Here I am, teaching in accordance with the Dharma methods. I have absolutely no intention to harm anyone or target anyone. I don't have such thoughts. But some of us often think this way. You might think, in every class today, you scolded me, you insulted me. Why are you like this? Thoughts like that may arise, especially discussing some Kadampa practices. Some of these practices have key instructions that really hit the mark. So some people are definitely dissatisfied with always thinking I'm harming them. This or for some reason, some people always believe that recites mantras, performs rituals. This person is practicing subjugation rituals, sure. When I meet someone on the street, I notice the look in their eyes seems a bit off. So I develop a kind of guardedness. I feel I must avoid others, must avoid associating with others. Otherwise, this person in my lifetime will be my greatest obstacle. But none of this is real. It's all just the result of my own delusions. In reality, this also shows that my practice, which refers to the methods and routines I have been following, hasn't been properly adjusted to suit my current needs and circumstances, which may be affecting my progress. The mind is very delicate, very fragile. We often say, doesn't the Bodhikare Avatara mention One should not be delicate. You'll suffer more. Our minds really shouldn't be too fragile or even too delicate. Absolutely not. If they are too delicate, then there will be a great deal of suffering. There are many things that have, over the years, harmed him. Because you are so delicate, the suffering you experience is actually much greater. This is also, in fact, a kind of symptom, a kind of suffering. And what is another kind of situation, for example? It seems like I remember reading somewhere before, maybe quite some time ago. For example, some people, even in the name of so-called love, attempt to control others. For instance, I am a mother and I love my child so very much, truly. She thinks I love him. But in reality, she is constantly controlling him. Controlling what? Have you eaten yet just now? Eat a little less. Eat a little more. Have you already washed your hands? Turn off the light, the hot water, this and that. Some people are already 40 or 50 years old. Some parents are like this. He himself truly believed in his mind that they think you should be like this. But actually, it really annoys others when you act this way. I'm really not a little kid. Not 1 or 2 years old anymore. I should know how to handle things myself. Make sure to turn off the lights. Make sure to close the door properly. You must do it. Please be careful when you go out. Sometimes, even when I'm crossing the street, people next to me, be careful. There's a car coming. Be careful, be careful. There's a red light ahead. In my mind, I'm thinking, honestly, I'm not that unintelligent or foolish, am I? It's impossible to even have a car. Even some smart yaks, some clever goats, they know to get out of the way just to make sure when a car comes. I'm capable, but for some people, it's just a habit. You truly love him, but you are perhaps sometimes a bit too controlling. Isn't that perhaps actually a kind of psychological problem? It could be considered one, because you think that by protecting them in this particular way, it's a good one for him. But in reality, that's not necessarily the case. This applies to parents, to couples, for example. Even among friends, people have all kinds of different, various, and sometimes even misguided and deluded minds, and often we aren't even aware of these delusions. We think our way of thinking is entirely normal. Of course, in the broader sense, all sentient beings, as we understand them, the world is indeed full of self-deluded, crazed people all around us. All sentient beings have an ignorant, deluded mind. But this ignorant, deluded mind is even more severe, especially in recent times. What is the main reason for this severity? It's because so much of the media that we consume every day, in particular, including certain value systems, as an example, for instance, bring about what? They make us become more and more attached. Believe more perfect. I feel happiest. In reality, in fact, this kind of guidance is actually a somewhat misguided and potentially misleading direction. Because of this, many of us are unable to find true happiness for so many reasons, can't attain happiness. So in the end, what do people think? Because the mind, which is often restless, cannot be tamed. In the end, people don't even have the courage to stay in this world. Why is it that now, for example, in 2019, last year, did you know the number of people who actually committed suicide worldwide was already over 1 million? Countries like Japan and China, indeed, are, comparatively speaking, nations with higher suicide rates. Over 1 million people, every 40 seconds, someone takes their own life. Some political leaders in the West have also said our pandemic isn't severe. More people died by suicide and traffic accidents. In fact, there is some truth to what they say. Indeed, why do so many people around the world commit suicide every year? Those who take their own lives often choose the most beautiful places, like lakes, such as Mount Fuji in Japan, or the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco, USA. Some really jump from tall buildings. Some end their lives by other means, some jump into rivers, and some use other methods. There are all kinds of ways why is this. Because these external circumstances, as we have seen before, are especially hurtful to them in particular, and especially so truly. And this hurt is because of their minds not. The other day I saw, seems like it was this month, there was a student somewhere quietly waiting for something new as the teacher took away his phone and his exam paper after they were taken away from here. After struggling with personal difficulties, he ultimately took his own life, leaving those first. People thought that perhaps the teacher had mistreated him in some way. Later, after checking the surveillance footage, the teacher did nothing. Because he was caught cheating, so his exam paper and phone were taken away. He cried for 20 minutes, and in the end, he took his own life. Actually,
the things that happen in the external world are really quite trivial and generally considered to be straightforward for the vast majority of people out there. He couldn't transform them into opportunities for spiritual growth and simply lacked the necessary courage. For that very reason, so what did he ultimately end up choosing in the end? After much thought, he chose suicide in the end. Sometimes when we look at practitioners, if you're not careful, it's very possible that you might also choose suicide. I always feel among us Buddhists, not everyone is necessarily really a good practitioner. Sometimes I wonder if it's because so many media outlets these days, including some TV dramas and movies, show people becoming monastics when they have nowhere else to turn. So in real life, when some people hit a dead end, becoming monastic, some become monks. On the surface, it seems they have truly, but in reality, their mental state is not very normal. Of course, among monastics, this is a very small minority. For those individuals who do not study or practice Buddhism, their ability to effectively adjust and regulate their minds is, these principles actually, even in the secular world, should be considered the mysteries of the mind. Don't say mystery of heart in ultimate truth. If we don't understand the mysteries of the mind in everyday life, we might think we are living a normal life. We don't have psychological issues. If someone says you have psychological problems, you might get really angry thinking, I don't have problems. You might even say, well, you're the one who's mentally ill. But in reality, if you don't observe carefully, just as we've discussed carefully here together today, even a very minor external factor, some insignificant matter, like a single remark from someone else. Honestly, someone's attitude toward you, or a small action someone takes toward you, could end up causing you lifelong harm, something you may never recover from. Perhaps in part because of this, your most precious life could truly at any moment come to an end as a direct consequence. So I believe that Buddhism truly does, in these respects, offers especially important key instructions. The author, Dampa Nyingma, lived just a few decades ago, less than 100 years from now. Then was there any scientific field of psychology? Tibet was very remote back then, and there probably wasn't such communication. Relying Bodhikaryavattara, ornament of the middle way. And the compendium of training, these profound Mahayana Buddhist instructions, he actually explained things here in very incredible detail. When we try to understand it now, in this present moment, we often pause to think carefully about what it truly is genuine and real. It describes the mental states of people today in detail and should be considered an extremely thorough depiction. If we can grasp this one sentence, even briefly, we will truly understand the mysteries of the mind. The Bodhikaryavattara. If, for example, one does not know this mind, honored one of profound teachings, whether seeking happiness or avoiding suffering, one will ultimately drift about meaninglessly. If we do not understand the mysteries of the mind, mystery honored in the Dharma, then if you seek happiness or avoid suffering, it may be meaningless, completely meaningless. But if you understand the meaning in this, these are all trivial matters, things in the world, no benefit or harm. If you absolutely and truly get accustomed to understanding things in this way, over time, then perhaps the things that happen in daily life, to you, these are not important matters. They're not very important at all. You can absolutely, completely handle them. Just like we mentioned earlier, as we mentioned before, whether it's conditions such as obsessive compulsive disorder or even paranoid delusional thoughts or beliefs, these things don't exist. For a practitioner, these are really very easy things to face. Honestly, they are, in fact. Others' views of you were never there to begin with. If they never existed, then how could they possibly harm you? They absolutely cannot harm you. So the best way to counteract it is to understand negative, wrong views and negative thoughts. If you can just grasp this point, sometimes you'll even find yourself genuinely amusing. Why? Like this, I should have a broad mind. And if you approach things in tolerance, then in fact, these matters shouldn't affect me. What is this called? As a matter of fact, this is referred to as positive thinking. There's also something called guided thinking. Psychologists talk about this. With positive thinking, you try to see everything from good perspective. It's not that serious. Mentioned earlier, if you think everything is painful, nothing is okay, the environment is dirty and messy, and the people here are bad too. Or this water I drank must be full of dirt and bugs inside. This cup must be very, very bad for me. Indeed, I suppose. Maybe it's really harmful to my health and my life in some way. So what am I supposed to do? It feels like the whole world is attacking and bullying me. People aren't nice to me either. Even the computers outside, for some reason, it really seems like they're against me. I should blow it up. If you think this way, perhaps, for example, then the world is truly filthy and utterly, completely dark. But if I think all fellow practitioners are manifestations of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, that everyone is full of faith and should be very good and have a truly positive mindset, this itself is a form of practice, a habit. But we don't understand this. We never received such education before. We keep increasing our greed, anger, and ignorance, and our anger keeps growing. Regarding anger, the concept of a hero, but in reality, anger is very serious. When anger is severe, some psychologists say, if a mother is experiencing intense anger, it's best not to breastfeed the child. Otherwise, the child will immediately be affected by toxins. In the past, we said greed, anger, and ignorance are afflictions, the 5 poisons. Why are they called poisons? They are poisonous. Moreover, the blood of someone filled with anger, if it is transfused into some white mice immediately, the mice, they die almost instantly in this situation. When our desires become too strong, at times, this is actually also a kind of negative emotion, an unrealistic kind of emotion. It is also harmful to a person's health. Our ignorance, sometimes this foolish mindset is also a kind of poison. There are many such deluded ways of thinking. We sentient beings are pitiful. We don't understand. Precisely because if you don't understand, many of our values are in fact actually not really entirely correct as we might think. Since they are not correct, we often suffer greatly in the cycle of rebirth. This suffering of ours is not only physical and bodily suffering, but more importantly, it doubles and even further intensifies our psychological pain. That psychological suffering with the causes of negative karma since beginningless time, as well as the education and the environment around us. In our daily lives, bring all kinds of false, misleading, untrue, or fabricated and deceptive information. When these negative causes and conditions come together, this is also the reason why so many sentient beings truly suffer so much. That is why we sincerely hope that many people can truly understand the mysteries of the mind. The mystery of the mind has 2 kinds of mysteries. One is the mystery of ultimate truth, and the other is the mystery of conventional truth. What's the mystery of conventional truth? Do suffering and happiness exist? At the conventional level, it does exist. But for us everyday, ordinary people in our daily lives, they are not truly real. Any of the sufferings don't exist conventionally. We start to increase them through our own deluded discriminations. This is especially tragic if our body is truly being burned by fire. That kind of pain, that is a normal phenomenon. Such suffering is understandable. But I don't have any fire in my body, yet my mind intensifies it. What is this called in Buddhism? This is called superimposition, exaggeration and diminution, right? Yes, superimposition. I'm talking about superimposition. I did not mention diminution, as I said, do remember that. So this is what Buddhism calls superimposition. Things that don't originally exist, this is called superimposition. It didn't exist in the first place, but you believe it does. Just like what I mentioned earlier, suffering from outside factors makes sense to you, but you just can't accept it. So for you personally, it becomes an intense pain. What is habitual tendency, a habit, thinking, suffering, happiness? It will keep increasing. What exactly is this? Well, this is in fact a kind of, so if we want to cut off this kind of suffering, what is the only way to do it? There's a method. You need to understand the causes and conditions behind. Also, in daily life, no matter what happens, don't get overly attached to it, seriously. Have a sense of going with the flow in your life and try to embrace it. For example, if you can go to the scripture hall today, you can think, I'll go, just go with the flow. If the person at the entrance says, you can't come in, what are you doing here? Excuse me, could you please just show me your pass if it's not too much trouble? Then that's fine, that's just fine. I'll just happily sing a Vajra song. Isn't it? I mean, perhaps kind of like what we talked about before, the song of happiness. Everything is happiness. Everything is absolutely joyful. As I walk along my path, I sing a Vajra song, letting its sacred melody softly. If you go back like this, then this is well. This is what happens. Didn't Asanga Bodhisattva, as you might recall, say, if you get sick at any point, being sick is also joyful, as it eliminates the negative karma from past life. If you don't get sick, not being sick is also joyful. A healthy body lets you practice. Being wealthy is also joyful. And the poverty is also joyful, and so on. If you are more accepting of circumstances like this, whatever happens, there's really no need to try and force things. Just now, someone called me. The housekeeper won't let me in. What should I do? Go with the flow. What do you mean go with the flow? I really can't simply go with the flow. I honestly just can't. I also think that for him, it might be great suffering. Either there is a kind of accepting circumstances. In some aspects of life, it can be better to go with the flow. Don't force things too much, right? There's the mindset of being content with little desire. Whatever conditions you have in your life, if you can have a sense of contentment, that's also good. There's another way of thinking, a kind of positive guidance. Things didn't go as planned. Maybe for me, this is actually really much. Thinking like this is beneficial for your practice. Personally, I feel that, to be honest, in my own opinion, I would say, no matter what happens in my life, whether it's getting sick or having surgery, or my parents' death and so on, facing situations. But when encountering various kinds of situations, I repeatedly observe my own state of mind. It's not because of realization, but rather as in this regard, I have practiced quite a lot, and I also enjoy reading. Because of this, when it comes to many different things in our daily lives, not only do my dreams sometimes fail to come true in reality, but I also encounter all sorts of different kinds of obstacles from both sentient and non-sentient beings, or even when I am harmed, I can completely understand. I look for a reason from another perspective. You see, I am in this epidemic. I devoted myself to translating, and I was especially happy during that time. Maybe you won't believe it, but honestly, I'm not saying my practice is extraordinary, but in real life, that's just how it is. So whenever each of us encounters suffering, sometimes when a path is impassable, if you insist on forcing your way through, maybe it's not really the right way, so just turn back. When you turn back, if you sing the Vajra songs along the way, maybe that's a very good thing. Because whether it's suffering or happiness, the way you think about it causes it to grow stronger. If you think this is happiness and joy, your happiness will keep increasing. But if you say, this is pain, why are these people bullying me? All these people are so bad. Are these people incarnations of demons? If you think like that, your suffering will only keep growing. So I think for this section, today I'll just talk about this section. For this part, I also hope you will reflect on it really carefully. I have more to say, but it's been really too long, so I can't continue. So maybe we'll just stop here for today. Is that all right with you? This is the law of nature. We'll end here.
Bandara